Randall, Jeffries. Raskin, Jeffries. Reschenthaler, Johnson. Riley of New York, Jeffries. Rivas, Jeffries. Rogers of Alabama, Johnson. Rogers of Kentucky, Johnson. Rose, Johnson. Ross, Jeffries. Rouser, Johnson. Roy, Roy. Ruiz, Jeffries. Ruley,
All right, so we just saw Congressman Chip Roy
Johnson.
defiantly standing up and not
Rutherford.
voting. That makes him the sixth House Republican
Johnson.
to not vote at all,
Ryan.
in addition to two House Republicans
Jeffries.
voting for members of Congress
Salazar.
other than Speaker Johnson. So Speaker Johnson, at this rate, will not be the
Johnson.
Speaker on the first
Salinas.
ballot. Former Speaker McHenry, are you surprised by this? I think
Sanchez.
you were calling for him to win on the first ballot. A lot of people were, by the way, including Speaker
Sanchez.
Johnson, I believe. And apparently that is not going to be the case unless either Congressman Norman or Congressman Massey change their votes.
Well, and Massey is unlikely to change. He's a man of his word, man of principle, and immovable. And by the way, for Kevin McCarthy on the first vote 2 years ago, which was about process reforms and expectations.
Schneider.
So this group here, and I think it's important to note that the skip votes, they're actively in the chamber.
Schreier.
Yeah, they're still there. Yep.
This, and from the moment the big skipped, we saw him in the chamber as the cameras were scanning, and you're explaining the glories of his opening day where we can see everything. But this is an active group of folks. We're going to find out what they want. This is what we had to do with Speaker McCarthy. There were some private expectation setting and demands, and then you had to show your public vote before you can effectuate some process or policy changes or goal setting. This is to prove that they have capacity. In a narrow House, it is showing that this group of Freedom Caucus members thinks that they're in a powerful position to set the agenda and control the House floor. They're, in my view, sitting here freely as a non-member of Congress for 90 minutes, I would tell you that they're playing the game as if it was 2 years ago or 4 years ago. It's a different game. Donald Trump won a very nice electoral college majority, a very nice popular vote majority, and brought in a Republican Senate, Republican House. The setting here is so different, to Scott Jennings' point. The situation is so different. And they're going to find that rather than being the beneficiaries of this cycle, they're going to be a part of the buzzsaw of dealing with the attention from former now incoming President Trump and what that would do to the Republican base.
Let's listen in. We want to hear a couple others, Congresswoman Sparks and Congressman Stubbe.
Smith of Washington, Jeffries. Smucker, Johnson. Sorensen, Jeffries. Soto, Jeffries. Sparks. Johnson. Stansbury, Jeffries. Stanton, Jeffries. Stauber, Johnson. Stefanik, Johnson. Style, Johnson. Stubbe, Johnson. Stevens, Jeffries.
3 House Republicans who have voted for candidates
Johnson.
other than
Stutzman,
Speaker Johnson.
Johnson.
while we were talking,
Supermajor.
Congressman Keith Self of Texas
Jeffries.
voted for Florida Congressman
Suwali.
Byron Donald. So that is basically three
Jeffries.
no's to Johnson,
Swalwell.
6 abstentions by House
Jeffries.
Republicans. So this is a group of 9 people
Sykes.
right now, and we
Jeffries.
don't anticipate any others as we mark our way down to Zinke. That's
Jeffries.
9 people who are, as of now, not voting for Speaker Johnson. Even if the 6 abstentions come back on board, Charlie Dent,
Johnson.
that's 3 no's.
Canada.
They could change their votes before they gavel it down, but the likelihood
Johnson of
is that
California.
Speaker Johnson is not going to win on this first ballot.
Jeffries.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I have to say this about the Freedom Caucus, or at least some members of the Freedom Caucus. They're always willing to take a
Thompson of
hostage.
Pennsylvania.
In this case, I'm talking.
And it's usually their speaker.
Figuratively speaking, and they're always willing to shoot that hostage, and that's what they're doing right now. Now we'll see how long this lasts, because as has been pointed out by Patrick McHenry, Donald Trump is the president. I'm sure he's going to be on the phone to a few of these guys saying, "Get on the team."
Lee.
But again, this speaks to denialism of some of the members who just simply want to blow the place up. They want to disrupt for the sake of disruption. I like to know, though, and Patrick, you would know the answer to this, but you were a chief deputy whip.
Jeffries.
Ordinarily, you should be telling the leadership where you're going to be before the vote. And as a courtesy, even if you're going to be against it, tell them. But I'm sure that didn't happen here with a few of these votes.
Well, don't be certain of that. Don't be certain of that. I mean, you have people that talk very bravely, as I said before, in closed doors. When you go out in front of the
Yeah.
cameras, you experience this.
Jeffries.
And actually, we've seen this a lot this Congress. But
Turner,
what we
Ohio.
see here is now a group of Republicans that,
Turner
if
of
they
Texas.
don't vote, at the end of this vote, you have the 3 Republicans voting for someone else.
Underwood.
If Hakeem Jeffries has a majority of those voting and present,
Valadao.
he's the speaker.
Johnson.
So these Republicans that are on the floor,
Andrew.
they are not counted. They are not a part of the count.
Johnson.
At the end of this vote,
Van Dyne.
Hakeem Jeffries could be Speaker of the House. That is the design of these House Republicans. They know this. This is a math question.
Johnson.
This is not a question of social psychology. They know what they're doing, and what they want to do is be negotiated with during this vote for them to cast some vote or say that they're present.
But even if they get something, and he gets those 6 votes, Speaker Johnson,
Vindman.
Jeffries will still
Jeffries.
have more votes
Wagner.
because of the 3 House Republican no votes.
But it would not have a majority.
But it would not. But that would not be a majority. So Jeffries would not become Speaker.
So to resolve this, he needs to get these members to say that they're there,
Wolf.
vote for anyone, so you can get to a second
Vote for
ballot.
anyone.
Anyone. Otherwise, you have Hakeem Jeffries presiding over
Jeffries.
a Republican House majority, which has not happened in the last 175 years, where the majority party did not elect the Speaker of the House.
Right. That's not going to happen. Right.
Well,
Jeffries.
You would think not with those that are calling themselves conservatives, the most conservative members of the House, they call themselves,
Jeffries.
saying that they're absent. Basically, standing presently, you saw with Chip Roy,
Yeah.
they're all in the chamber. They're not hiding. They want to be negotiated with, and they want to show that they have marked their territory. In my view, the best analysis of this, the best way to think of this, is you have a dog that is now marking their territory. So you have a group of House Republicans that are peeing on the closest lamppost to say they're in charge. That is it. And it's probably even more crass than that, but that's what we're dealing with this House.
But Jake, you asked me about how Speaker Pelosi was able to bring in all her factions together and get to unity. To build on what the congressman just said, it reminds me of Kennedy and Johnson, where Kennedy said, "Bring in Johnson as my vice president, so he's not peeing from the outside inside," right? But here's the thing, I think, is that the Freedom Caucus is delusional. I'm not sure what it is that they really want. They're arguing for cuts in spending, but Donald Trump doesn't even agree with that. The margin is so tight, they're going to need Democratic votes.
So let's listen at the end here, because we have to see what these other 7 members do.
Johnson. Zinke. Johnson.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from the Virgin Islands seek recognition?
Speaker, out of parliamentary inquiry, I note that the names of the representatives Northern Mariana, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia were not called, representing collectively 4 million Americans. Mr. Speaker, collectively, the largest per capita of veterans in this country.
Does the gentlelady have a parliamentary?
I asked why they were not called.
Gentlelady's recognized.
I asked why they were not called from the parliamentarian, please.
Delegates-elect and the resident commissioner-elect are not qualified to vote. Representatives-elect are the only individuals qualified to vote in the election of a speaker. As provided in Section 36 of the House Rules and Manual, the speaker is elected by a majority of the members-elect voting by surname.
Mr. Speaker, this body and this nation has a territories and a colonies problem. What was supposed to be temporary has now effectively become permanent. We must do something about this
The
problem.
gentlelady is no longer recognized. House will be in order. The reading clerk will now call the names of the representatives-elect who did not answer the first call of the roll.
Biggs of Arizona. Johnson. Carson. Jeffries. Cloud. Johnson. Clyde. Clyde. Gosar. Gosar. Harris of Maryland. Johnson. Roy. Johnson. Waltz. Johnson.
If there are any representatives-elect who did not answer the call of the roll, they may come to the well and vote at this time.
Clyde. Clyde. Gosar. Johnson.
President Trump.
Clyde Johnson.
The holdouts voted for Johnson isn't just to sort of get right with him and Donald Trump. It's also to make sure that Hakeem Jeffries doesn't become Speaker of the House.
Well, if you
But the
kind of,
key, and I just want to say,
Yeah, go
the
ahead,
key
sorry.
though is that there still were more than 2 votes for somebody other than Johnson. I believe there were 3,
yes, there were
which means he cannot win on
not
this
on this
round.
ballot,
On
right?
this round.
If that holds, then no, he can't, and that's what's forced the hand of these conservatives who were essentially ignoring the calls for them to put their votes down on the record to basically
And you
flush
see him
out.
huddling. Is that Dusty Johnson? You see him huddling with Dusty Johnson, no relation, from the great state of South Dakota.
Yeah, and essentially, the hands of these conservatives was forced because if they, allowed it to go forward that way, then obviously Hakeem Jeffries is where he is. But they did that with the knowledge. Again, it seems as though they were perhaps trying to flush out and see whether there were any other no votes in their conference.
And guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but it looked like Johnson gave
Anybody know how to lip read?
No, I know, but
Dusty
so I'm
Johnson's
looking-
covering his mouth.
I
Mike
have
Johnson is not.
emotions down. And like, it looked like Johnson indicated with a flip of a finger, like he wanted to go again right away. At least that's how I interpreted that gesture. So the whatever negotiation needs to happen to bring a couple of these people over to him is happening in real time right now.
It sure
You're
is.
watching some of that strategy play out. In this
And
conversation.
a member of the House Freedom Caucus, I'll say, reiterated to me in a text that what they still want, which is something that they've been public about, now we have 3, is that Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, become the House Rules Chair. Manu Raji, I'm going to bring you in, and you can tell our viewers what the chances of that would be.
Very slim to none, Dana. That would require a significant reversal from Mike Johnson to give that. And it actually could cause a revolt among more establishment Republicans, more middle of the road Republicans, people who are aligned with Mike Johnson would revolt in that idea, because that is such an important position to essentially determine the flow of legislation onto the House floor. Remember Kevin McCarthy, in order to become Speaker of the House, he changed practice. Typically on that very powerful committee, they would put the Speaker would put his closest allies on that committee. But McCarthy, in order to get the job, agreed to put 3 of more of his detractors of sorts on the committee. That includes Chip Roy, who we just saw there ultimately vote for Mike Johnson. That also includes Ralph Norman, who just voted against Mike Johnson, and also Thomas Massey, who just voted against Mike Johnson as well. The question is going to be ultimately whether or not what these members ultimately want. The pressure is going to be enormous on Ralph Norman and Keith Self, in particular, one of those, Jake, that will need to at least flip in order for him to get the job. A couple of those.
Right, and I just want to say, as I go over to Jake, what we're seeing right now is fascinating. We're really seeing what tends to happen behind the scenes, the negotiations, the horse trading, the conversations happening on the floor. And the person you see now to Speaker Mike Johnson's right is Tim Burchett,
who did vote for him, but is clearly trying to be a conduit between the speaker and what looks like 3 no votes want in order to become yes votes. And
Things that's interesting right now we should note, and I want to get former Speaker Patrick McHenry to weigh in on this, is so the 6 holdouts that didn't vote all ended up voting before the gavel came down. They all voted for Johnson. They were flexing their muscle, showing what they could do, but also they voted for Johnson knowing that he was not going to win on the first ballot. He lost the first vote. He lost the first vote because of 3 other members of the House Freedom Caucus. Thomas Massey of Kentucky, who voted for the House Majority Whip Tom Emmer of Minnesota, Ralph Norman, who voted for Jim Jordan, and Congressman Self of Texas, who voted for Byron Donalds. Is the negotiating right now between all 9 of these individuals, or is it with the 3 no's, or is it with the 6 holdouts who then ultimately voted for Johnson? What's your best information?
Well, they're together.
All 9 of them.
All 9 are together. Kristen said at the very beginning of this conversation, said that we changed the new rules package changes the threshold to vacate the chair to 9 members.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which
Kristen,
to
you're right.
remove a speaker. That's what
So now we have 9 Republicans saying they can remove the speaker. They've shown that. They peed on the lamppost. Now it's a question of what do you do next? The speaker, in his hand motion, just consulting with John Legansky, who is former Speaker McCarthy's chief strategist on opening week and throughout his speakership, and he said that motion, it's clear to him we're going directly to the second ballot. The speaker thinks he does not need to negotiate, and John and I agree on this point, which is the speaker has to negotiate. That's what you have to do. You may try to push them in the second vote by going immediately, but these holdouts, the 9 holdouts, eight of which were holdouts against Speaker McCarthy 2 years ago. These 3 holdouts will remain strong and know what they're doing.
So the House Freedom Caucus is dozens of individuals. Was there, as far as you know, some sort of plan where it's like, well, 9 is the number that is needed in this rule package to bring down a speakership. All we need is 9 of us to do this, and you 3 do this, and you 6 do this, and everyone else, you can just vote for Johnson. I mean, is it that strategic?
From the outside, it looks that strategic, but it's far messier in the room and the negotiations that they have amongst themselves of who's willing to do what. And in this atmosphere, I think Scott Jennings said this correctly, with Trump involved coming into the White House, it's different. So you had these 6 Republicans saying they're brave enough to not say anything. They were not brave enough to cast a separate ballot from what Donald Trump's choice is for speaker. The 3 remaining, Thomas Massey has a very specific set of problems with Speaker Johnson. I don't think they're going to be resolved. That is about performance. It is the shine that got knocked off Johnson in December with this spending package he negotiated. Massey said that's too far,
right?
That we can beyond which we can bear. Ralph Norman has been a very difficult member to negotiate with a moving set of targets he's had to negotiate in the past. That's likely the present situation. And Self of Texas, significantly similar to Ralph Norman in that regard. So we're going to find out what they want and the purpose of this.
And not only has Massey got problems with Johnson, Donald Trump has no sway over Thomas Massey. Massey voted for Ron DeSantis for president, and at one point Donald Trump came out against Thomas Massey, who, by the way, is my congressman from Kentucky, in one of his primaries. Unsuccessfully, by the way. Massey overcame that opposition from Trump. So if you're thinking like you can just get Donald Trump on the phone here, maybe that helps with Ralph Norman and the other guy, but it's not going to help with Massey. I think the mindset of the Republican Party here is important. I mean, we're not in the peanut gallery. We've been elected to govern. You know, the House, the Senate, and the White House. The American people put the Republican Party in charge across the board. And so there are some responsibilities here to the voters who cast those votes to say, are you going to do something in Washington other than sit around and read each other's names out loud all day?
One of the other points I think is worth noting is that by some measures, Mike Johnson is the most conservative Speaker of the House ever, just in terms of his personal political beliefs. Now, I realize that the definition of what conservative is being redefined in the era of Trump, but it's certainly when it comes to social issues, certainly when it comes to denying the results of the 2020 election and on, he has been in lockstep with President Trump. So it's not as if this is a squish, as House Republicans, that's a term from days gone by. He's not a moderate. He's not a liberal. He is a conservative, and I think that he would, if he were here, he would say he passes the most conservative legislation that his party allows him to do.
As the only squish in the room, I can tell you. I can tell you.
I can certify.
Thank you.
One thing, by the way,
Let him just finish.
is this vote closed, by the way?
Just Speaker Johnson is leaving the floor of the House right
And
now.
where he-
What is that?
Where he's going is the back room.
The vote is not closed. We should note it has not been gavel closed.
And we did not see who was in the room, that back room, right off the House floor. It's not the cloakroom. It's actually where the head of the pages used to have an office. It has four chairs in there, a small little table. That's it. So who's likely in that room are Thomas Massey, Ralph. Sorry,
It's Tom Massey with Margaret
wrong.
Taylor Greene.
Let me just Ralph Norman could be. So you have Norman himself in there and negotiating directly with the speaker, one or both of them, and that could be the vote. It could close things out.
Can I just kind of disagree but agree with both the congressman and Scott here, wherein the dynamics are different because Republicans won all three chambers, two chambers in the White House. It's clear that the party is still the same. This is the same show, tired show we've seen even when McCarthy was actually running. So to challenge Scott a little bit, it's clear to me that Donald Trump doesn't have sway over his own caucus, his own conference. And that's really the problem going into this next administration. If you can't get this one right, how are you going to make the hard votes and the hard decisions?
So let me go just to check in with Manu Raja on Capitol Hill, because Manu, there is something going on in the back of the chamber right now. Speaker Johnson is meeting with some individuals. Obviously, he needs to do something to become Speaker of the House. What can you tell us?
Yeah, and Jake, members just got a notification to return to the floor immediately to proceed to a second roll call vote. So that's what they are being told, that this vote is going to happen soon, that they're going to move to essentially do what we saw just moments ago. There'll be nominating speeches given to nominate the speaker candidates, one for Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, one for Mike Johnson, and then afterwards they will proceed to a roll call vote, alphabetical order. We'll see if any votes change from now until then, because as you mentioned, these discussions are happening in real time on the House floor. Mike Johnson was huddling with his leadership team about how to proceed. He's talking to some of the key liaisons between the holdouts and with leadership, whether that's is going to be enough to get those two members. Really, the focus is going to be on these two key Republican members, Ralph Norman of South Carolina, as well as Keith Self of Texas. Can they flip? That's going to be the big question as we head into the second ballot change.
Well, are they going to, that's my next question for you, Manu, is are they going to gavel this down so that the first ballot is over and they go to the second ballot? Because they have not, I mean, those who are just tuning in to House proceedings for the first time may be intrigued to learn that they can stop time in the House of Representatives. A closed vote can, until the vote is closed, time stands still, and everybody keeps moving. But I mean, right now they have not officially gavelled the first ballot to a close.
Yeah, and they're tallying the vote. They're counting to make sure that they don't have this real-time vote that we have on our screen. They're doing this by hand, Jake. So, of course, as you know, this takes time for them to ultimately tally the vote. And then they will announce the final vote on the floor. The clerk will say that no speaker has been elected. And I think at that point, we can expect the second ballot to take place. The question for the speaker will be, Speaker Johnson will be, has anything changed? They hope that they will, but if he loses again, we'll see what he decides to do after that second vote, Jake.
And there is former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, we should just point out once again that she has recovered from breaking her hip in an overseas congressional delegation trip to Italy. Remarkable moment in that she broke her hip, then posed for the big class photo with everybody over there, Democrats and Republicans, and then went to the hospital. Anyway, it's good to see her on her feet. What are you thinking as you watch this all?
I just keep remembering that it was, I think, October of 2023, and I was here at this desk with you, Jake, and I said, to quote the great Hans Gruber, you asked for miracles, Democrats, I give you the GOP. And
Nice.
We are right back there in the same spot where Republicans, now in what should be a stronger position, seeming to not send the message that they're ready to govern on this first ballot. However, what I do wonder is, does the fact that Donald Trump is president, does the fact that the Republican base likes Donald Trump a lot make this dynamic very different than what we saw during the Tea Party era, in a way that says this first round was message sending, but ultimately the second round works, that they wanted to put down a marker to